I am qualified in Australia and New Zealand, where I practiced for about 5-6 years before moving back to Sri Lanka. And now a proud PIM MBA. Thank you for giving your time to us today for me to take you all through my final project for ESP, which was my business venture, Ace Acumen Private Limited. So before I sort of jump into this, just a second to say the idea to do this business was always sort of lurking at the back of my mind. There was always a seedling, but I think I never really had the right risk appetite to really go for it. I was very comfortable in a corporate role. I was very happy doing a 9-to-5, and there wasn't enough impetus to sort of push me to take that chance. So whilst COVID meant a lot of things for different people, for me, it was a genesis point. It's where it really started for me. So today's presentation, I'll just briefly take you all through the background, the business case, my business model and plan, briefly through the feasibility study that I conducted, the project itself, which is then sort of going into the plan, the implementation, and from the implementation, 3 critical things: the variance analysis, the output and outcomes from my project, and also the skills I displayed, which I think that's really where the PIM experience kicked in, and a lot of support from Dr. Travis and the team, which helped see me through some of the latter stages as well. In terms of background, so my business is called Ace Acumen Private Limited. I picked that name because I wanted to start with the A, so it'll be at the top of the directory. Yeah, so sorry, in terms of the work that's involved itself, it's quite straightforward. The industry is regulated by the Australian Tax Office, by what's called the Australian Prudential Regulation Authority, also called APRA, and it is directed and informed by one act and one act only, the SIS Act. But the SIS Act is super technical. It is not for everyone. It's not light reading, and it's constantly evolving, constantly changing, and it is open to interpretation. That's where formal training, lots of experience, and networking comes into play. Understanding how to interpret it, working with auditors to make sure auditors and accountants are thinking the same way, all that stuff matters. In terms of the process itself, basically, you do your accounts, You have an independent auditor audit your accounts, and if the auditor says everything is okay, everything's okay. The auditor makes that determination based on the act. But if the auditor deems that you've done something that's not in line, for example, you bought a car and you give it to your son, or you bought a house and the rental money is coming into your personal account and not your pension account. Those things happen, a variety of consequences result. You might get penalties. In some case, the tax office may take over your fund, your assets get frozen. You may even be brought in front of civil or criminal charges, depending on the seriousness of the case. Why I'm showing you this is to show you how important it is to get this stage right. Because once you've made a mistake and your auditor picks it up, it's a little too late in the day to fix it. But if you've got a solid accounting system and a solid processing system, this is a fantastic way to make sure that your money is safe and you retire in peace and the government doesn't get involved. So lots of opportunity, but interestingly, the rate of accounting firms that are growing in this field is at a decreasing rate compared to the rate at which this industry is going. And there's a very specific reason why. Famously high staff turnover in this industry. Now you can link this back to the fact that a lot of new graduates, millennials, don't like the nature of this work. It's repetitive, it's monotonous. They get bored after about a year or two of doing the same account processing. So they quit, which brings the second problem. Like I said, it's a very technical field. So there's a lot of training and a lot of sort of resources that's put into getting these graduates up to speed. There's a huge opportunity cost when they leave. And the accounting firms are left with, not trying to figure out how to sort of get someone back in, train them up to speed, especially if they leave in the middle of season. And the third one is cost and idle capacity. An average Australian graduate commands about 40 to 50,000 Australian dollars in salary at the moment as a starting salary every year. When they pay that much and they get graduates in, they can only use them for about 4 to 5 months in the SMSF cycle because the audit cycle only runs once a year. So there's a lot of idle capacity with graduates who are hired just for SMSF accounts processing. And this is a problem that's been going on for a while now. It's not a new thing. It's been sort of plaguing the industry. There's been a lot of conversation about how to get through this. In fact, when I was researching my business idea, there were other problems as well, but these are the three that kept coming back, and they said, we're not really sure what to do with this because we need trained staff, but we also need to make sure it's cost effective. But no one was willing to take the jump and go into an outsourcing model for a couple of reasons. One, they weren't really convinced that someone outside of Australia could be trained to that level. They weren't sure anyone would understand the intricacies of the industry. But then COVID happened. And whether we liked it or not, we were all faced with the reality that you can't have people in seats anymore. Everyone's working remotely. And a couple of other things happened as well. One, this survey came out, which really changed the way a lot of Australian firms thought about how they ran remote work. And the second thing was cost re-engineering. It became front and center in every strategy meeting. Was it really worth holding real estate in CBDs that were now shut down with no one going in there, but rents were still going in? Even those who had a rental moratorium period knew that at the end of the year, they'd have to pay this rent. But did they really need a 20-seater when they realized only 50% coming in could get the job done as well? So a lot of conversations started opening up. I was well placed that I had a really good peer network from when I used to work in Australia. So I was sort of privy to this and I could tap into the conversations as they were happening, which is why I was able to quickly do a little survey with about 25 firms that I had previously worked with. I asked them pretty straightforward questions. I was trying to understand, what do you want? If you were to give me your outsourcing or even someone else, if I could arrange it for you, what are your key pain points? No surprises, cost, agility, quality. Those are the three big things they wanted. Cost was top of mind for everyone. Generally in this field, it is quality that's top of mind. But because of COVID and how the landscape had shifted, everyone was really keen on cost savings. When I say agility, I don't mean speed alone. I mean the ability to sort of read what's happening in the market, learn the new technical changes, and sort of adapt practices quickly. And third is quality of work. So audit readiness basically means, are my accounts ready for audit at any period of time? If an auditor shows up randomly, are the accounts ready? There should be no audit fatigue or any time spent reworking anything. And turnaround, speed of jobs. So out of the 25 firms I spoke to, they were all at various levels in terms of working with BPOs. Some had considered, some weren't working at all. Some were working with BPOs for non-super fund related work. So the three qualitative things that they all said was, look, we're looking for digital solutions, because we've missed the boat. And until COVID-19 happened, we didn't realize we had this huge gap in terms of, being digitized and, transforming. We want to work with someone who can communicate with us effectively. We want someone we know. We want a relationship with the person we're working with. Because they were already working with BPOs in Vietnam, in Philippines, in India. But what they found was that they had to train the BPO owners or the BPO managers on how to do the work the way they wanted it done. So this was really my in. I said, look, you know me, I know you. Give me a chance. Give me 2 firms, give me 2 funds. Let me do it and show you how quickly we can do this and how well we can do this. So that's how my in was. The business model that I set up, this doesn't look nice, but it was. So Heat Essentials is basically a partnership between my sister and I. She is also a chartered accountant. She lives and works in Australia. She acts as the front for me. I do travel quite a bit to meet clients, but at the moment, what we do is work is engaged by Heat Essentials, which is then technically subcontracted to ASAC Human in Sri Lanka. Once the work is done, we issue an invoice out to Heat Essentials, who then bills the end customer. So are customers aware that the work is done at this level? Yes, they are. The way we've structured it this way is one, essentially, this is the back end. And this is what my whole project was about, starting this and running it. To be quite frank with you, the way I did it this way was because around the time I started this was when the forced conversions were happening in our banks. And I wasn't ready to bring any Forex in at that time for it to be forced converted at a standard rate. So I did it this way so I could hold that money and bring it in when the rules were a little bit better and when we had more stability in terms of how our Forex is going to be treated, which essentially happened, I think, from about 3 to 4 months after we started this. I was able to bring my remittances in and I let market forces determine the conversions. That was fine. In the interest of time, I won't take you through this, but basically I adopted a lean startup model. This was actually based on Dr. Travis's advice as well. I found that learning through iteration, being able to course correct during the course of business itself is probably the best way to go about this because I knew the clients, I had some space to play. And I also felt that, like I said, what I was doing was novel. Everyone, Haley's, Cloudforce, Weevil, there are some really big players who are doing this exact same thing. So what I can offer them is really the communication, is having that line of conversation saying, let's work together. Let's try and fix problems together as a team so that the accounting firms in Australia don't see me as just a service provider. They see me as part of the team, so that was sort of the thing I was trying to build with them. Feasibility analysis, there are only 2 key areas that I was concerned about. From a technical and production feasibility, internet connectivity is a huge concern for me at the time. If we were going to work remotely, I needed to make sure that we could be live and we could be responsive all at the time that was needed in Australian requirement. Hardware and software acquisition, there were 2 problems. Hardware, I was essentially nervous about. At the time of drawing this plan up, I had envisioned that I would employ about 3 to 4 full-time staff to run this operation. So I was a little worried, would we be able to get the hardware? Because we had some import bans coming in at the time, but we managed to circumvent it thinking, right, we can get some second-hand pieces, we can forage around, we could sort that out. Software was a bigger concern for me because I had to get everything online and I had to pay in dollars for some of that. And for me, that was the biggest sunk cost. I was looking at about, at the time, I think I was looking at about $4,000 to $5,000 per employee just to get them up to speed on all the software applications that had to be installed to make sure that they could deliver that, sort of seamless, digitized workflow experience for the customers. In terms of financial feasibility, Forex earnings, how we could bring that here, how we could park it and then use it to pay for these things was a big concern because of one, forced conversion, and also 2, without going into detail, that was a difficult time to bringing Forex into the country. Estimated funding I needed at the time was about $1 million in my estimate, which I had in terms of personal savings, as well as my parents are willing to lend me some money at the beginning. And I set a target to be profitable within the first 4 months of starting the operation. My marketing feasibility, basically I did a market gap analysis, which was the survey results that I showed you previously. I also conducted a pestle analysis to understand the political layout, the economic, social layout, the technical layout, which I covered in the technical feasibility. environmental, ethical, and legal analysis. It was an interesting time to do this because it was smack bang in the middle of COVID. So there was a lot of uncertainty, but I think the challenge was also to sort of say, right, when the dust settles and once the smoke blows over, what we're going to be left with is a very different business landscape. How do we navigate through this? How do I build this business, however small it might be in size, to future-proof it so that we can still get on with what we're trying to do? I didn't want my business to be a COVID solution. Do you know what I mean? That was my biggest concern. I didn't want accounting firms to start working with me and then 2 years down the line sort of say, thanks for your help, but we've got this from now. So a lot of that went into proposing what my unique value positioning was as well. It meant a lot of travel. So in that first year, there's been a lot of costs, but I think well worth, because we're now really well placed. We've leveraged our position, my previous working relationships, and also the ability to deliver during COVID has held the business in good stead. This is a sort of an analysis we did as part of the Viva. I've just kept it here because it gives you an idea of what we were trying to do. So if you start from create, I was trying to create a seamless digitized workflow. So basically the work that comes from the account, because this is completely paperless. That's the other thing, right? I should say there isn't a piece of paper in our office anywhere. Completely paperless, everything is digitized. I wanted to create consistent quality, consistency being the key word, and I wanted efficiency. So when I say efficiency, I went to the real core sort of definition of efficiency. I wanted to be able to give as much output as they could with very minimal input, which meant absolute process excellence. So I've been savage with process. We're constantly mapping process chains out. We're constantly taking non-value adding creations out, looking at core value adding points and trying to see how we can sort of move things around. And interestingly, I've been forced to look at that quite a bit because of some of the concerns I've been having with getting the right talent in Sri Lanka. I've had to really rethink what parts of the process we can do here and what part we've had to navigate out. So more on that a little later. On the raise, we had to raise the technical competencies, the relationships, and the communication ability of not just myself, but also the staff. I was hoping to reduce cost and lead time for my customers, but also eliminate an audit contravention report, which is basically a qualified audit report. In this business strategy canvas, when I say regional, I'm talking about India, Vietnam, and Philippines, which are the biggest competitors for this kind of service. What I just want to show you is in red, what I've done there is shown you, these are the sort of 3 areas where I figured I'd find it quite hard to compete. In terms of cost, very hard to beat India and Vietnam because of volume and cost efficiencies. Job lead time, again, quite challenging. Sri Lankan efficiency levels still have a little far to go to catch up with processing when it comes to Indian. But technical competencies, look, when I mapped it mapped high because I'm a chartered accountant and I work in the field, and one of my key strengths is the fact that I work with audit firms. But having said that, this is where my real strengths lie. And interestingly, this is what tides you over, having the right relationships, having the right communication channels, and the fact that we were willing to do a seamless digitized workflow. What that meant was that I was willing to go in and help the accounting firms take all their manual files and convert it into digital folders. And that's work no one wants to get their hands on because it's messy, it's dirty, and it's not cost effective. But like I said, I didn't want to build a business for COVID. I wanted to build a business that would last beyond. So I felt like if I put in that time and effort now, it's going to pay dividends in the long run. And it did. So this is pretty much another, just an explanation of what I just said. So I won't waste your time on that. When I planned the work out, the work breakdown itself was in 4 key areas under planning, operations, business development, and monitoring. So we had a Gantt chart to support this. A lot of this didn't happen according to plan. This was all very idealistic. Most of it did, but a lot of it didn't also. In terms of resources and budget allocation, a lot of it I was able to do on my own, but these are sort of the 3 areas that I had to outsource myself. So registration, setting up the IT infrastructure, and the accounts preparation for my team itself. In terms of project implementation, in these 3 areas, there were significant delays and changes and variances. So the biggest one for me was registration. Like I mentioned briefly before we started, registration, there was a huge delay, which effectively meant that bank accounts couldn't be set up. I couldn't receive payments, and with a lot of the firms, they weren't willing to get into engagements with me unless I had that set up. I won't take up too much time. Yeah. So this is the good news though. In terms of revenue, yes, it's a red because I didn't actually make how much I thought I would in those first 3 months. I started late, but the good news comes a little later. In terms of employee costs, a lot less than I thought it would be, mainly because I decided to postpone the recruitment of the full-time personnel that I had envisioned initially. I charge them in dollars, yes. So Heat Essentials in Australia charges them, because here in ACE, we take it in rupees. So when I bring it in here, I convert it for my purpose. Yeah, I report and record in rupees. Yeah. Rent and utilities, we didn't end up having an office for the first half of that business because we were in lockdown. So it was a remote working facility. And subscriptions, because there was a difference in the recruitment plan, I didn't have to get as many subscriptions as I had envisioned earlier. Business structure itself, we were hoping to receive remittances from the Australian counterpart monthly, but I ended up just holding it in an Australian account until things tided over. So this was my P&L from 1st November to Jan 31st, which was the period we did our Viva for. I made revenue of 500,000, and I made a total comprehensive profit of about 461,000 in those first 3 months. I should just go through all of this, I think. Can I go back, please? I just want to just. Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you. So I just want to draw your attention to this. So this was actually in conversation at the time of doing my Viva, and it's something I was sort of mentioned to Dr. Travis as well. We had a really big challenge in getting the right talent in Sri Lanka because there's a huge brain drain. I also found that a lot of people who did come to interview, the second or third question would be, if I take this job, will it help me migrate in a year or two? And that was a concern for me because I was going to put in a lot of time and effort training, and I wanted sort of the people we were talking to be passionate about what we were going to do. But I think it's also important not to be too idealistic with these things. You have to understand where people are coming from as well. And as a processing business, I think it also pushed me to change and sort of relook at how we were setting the business up. One of the sort of input that Dr. Travis gave me was start looking at graduates who are still in university, who are in their final year. If they can come in and do repetitive work for you, just pay them on a cash flow basis, get that work flowing. So that's one thing we ended up doing. And the other thing is, now when I have a candidate come in and tell me, you know, can I migrate in 2 years? Will I meet new firms if I do this? I've said, yes, you can. And that's fine. And what's that pushed me to do is I've had to set up the workflow so that it's not person dependent, it's process dependent. So no matter who comes in, they can just pick it up and do the work with the right minimal training. What that's also meant is I've had to retain a lot of the core value addition areas with myself, or I've had to give it to a firm that I'm working with in India, which is sad, but I've just found that it's been very hard to get the right talent in Sri Lanka who are willing to stick it out. People of that high caliber are really not willing to lock into a new job at the moment. They're all looking at migration opportunities, or if I do take them in, they have a very high ask in terms of pay, which I would do, except I know a lot of them are sort of thinking, can I use this leverage to migrate? So we're in a bit of a catch-22 situation with that. So we've had some really good feedback that's come through from customers. There's been significant cost savings, a lot of satisfaction expressed in relationship and knowledge base. There's been a lot of demand for complementary work, which we've now started doing for secretarial work, bookkeeping, tax, etc. Because I do have a background in tax and wealth management as well. I've tried not to get into that because, again, a very technical area, and I am stretched quite thin at the moment, so I don't want to get into it. But we've had a lot of demand for those processes as well. In terms of the skills displayed, I feel like these are 3 big areas that I was able to sort of shine in. I was able to conceptualize the requirement, and drop a value stream, which helped me understand which areas to focus in, which areas I could, for example, even now that we are working with the JV in India, able to understand what parts can go there, what can stay here. The way to nurture relationships, influence outcomes, have constructive dialogue, and also be able to take some criticism and feedback on board and adjust our processes accordingly. I think my technical skills have really helped me in good esteem, being a chartered accountant, having previous experience in process and also transition management, thanks to my previous workplace brandings, and also change management. I think one of the key things is you need to learn to take feedback and change positively and not personally. And I think that's been a huge learning experience for me as well. To when a customer tells us this wasn't fast enough, I know that they're not talking about me, they're talking about the process, and to be able to apply that in how we do our work and how we revert has been a learning experience. So current state, so this is the good news. We're looking at a revenue of 70,000 AUD for the financial year 21-22, which will end on 30th June. This is actually a very conservative estimate. I'm hoping we can close a bit better. At the moment, I have recruited 4 full-time employees in Sri Lanka, which is what I wanted to do when we started, but we're finally there. I've now entered a JV with an Indian outsourcing firm who is undertaking all the extended work. So we're now doing payroll, secretarial work, and also bookkeeping. On top of that, I've just started, I haven't really had a chance to tell Dr. Travis this. Last time I spoke to you, I told you I was toying with the idea of some consulting. So I've just started working with the Australian government on a market development program. And one of the sectors that they're looking at is developing the local BPO sector. So as a consultant, I've just been working with them to try and understand what are some of the, based on my learnings, what are some of the obstacles, how we can sort of help grow that industry in Sri Lanka. I'm very passionate about the fact that we have some very clever, very talented accountants here. More often than not, they're just not given the right soft skills and the right springboard to really launch themselves. And if our government isn't willing to step forward, hey, let's take the help from whoever will, right? So, so that's where we're at. Sorry if I went over time, but thank you very much. Because I'm the only one. Thank you. Thanks.
I think this is your project, your business. Yeah, I highly appreciate as a female, you start your own business. That's the currently need for our country. And I think in that aspect, I highly appreciate your effort here. But I think this project you have presented or you have converted as a research of your evaluation. Am I correct? This paper is part of your right, but here, you have very good knowledge about your project and your research. I found out about it, but here we evaluate. I will give comment based on this, right? Okay, but I think you have explained a lot of things. It's no argument, but here the thing you have analyzed and you have shown gap. Gap analysis, but here you have mentioned only market. What about other aspects of analysis? How do you identify the gap?
Sorry. Yes, Professor. So for me, I felt that the key gaps were going to be in terms of technical and the market itself. Those are the 2 areas I focused on. So technical, as I explained, for me, I felt that the provision of internet, the hardware, software, that would be the biggest sort of tangible gaps that I could foresee. Yeah, and the market gap. Yeah.
But here you are highlighting the market.
Yeah.
But the actual purpose of this project?
Sure. So the real purpose was to serve a very niche market. What I found was that there's a lot of accounts processing that happens in the industry, but there isn't any that really focuses on one industry, one specific area, which is this pension fund area, which requires a lot of technical know-how and a lot of repetitive work. And it's very, very sort of, not everyone can sort of plunge into it. You need to have the right background, the right training, and the right learning attitude to do it. And I found that if I could get into that field, I could really take over a big volume. And with the volume comes also perfection, because the more you repeat it, the better you get at it. And you can also be a lot more profitable with it. So that's why I went into that specific area, because not a lot of firms in Sri Lanka are working in that specific space. Yeah.
How do you meet stakeholders' expectation? Here you are highlighted customers.
Yes.
But how do you fulfill other stakeholders' expectation through your company, through your
the business itself?
Yeah.
When you say other stakeholders, are you referring to sort of employees? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. So when I did my pestle analysis, this was the main focus, to sort of understand how I could deal with the different angles. I think from a government point of view, as an export earner, I'm really well placed in terms of where the government wants small businesses to go. But personally, I find that even though the government says export, their focus is on big export businesses. Smaller businesses like mine don't really get the recognition or support that we could bring in. A collective of small businesses like mine could probably do more than one big exporter, So that's one aspect of it. We have been given tax-free status, but that is of course changing. And I think that's actually quite fair. I honestly don't have an issue with it. In fact, I've always wondered why, there wasn't a threshold on how many, on what level of export income was tax-free or whatever. Apart from that, I also feel that other stakeholders that we deal with, employees, for example, we are very particular on making sure they get the right training and knowledge. And like I said, Professor, my key concern at the beginning was that a lot of people who came for interviews were focused on one thing, migration. And their key question was, if I work for you, can I migrate? Can I use this to go to country XYZ? But we've also changed our thinking, and we've come to understand sometimes you've got to do what's right for you personally and for your family. And I understand that for employees, sometimes the right thing for us to do is to encourage them to make those changes if they have to. We have to be ready to set up the process and the work structure so that we are not dependent on 1 or 3 people. It needs to be a process that runs regardless. So in terms of supporting those stakeholders, because one of the things when I started this, and I remember talking to Dr. Travis about this, is I said, I'm really passionate about making sure that we have a really good graduate pool and we're able to use our sources here. And we give them that foreign training and foreign exposure without necessarily flying over, because that's what countries like India and Philippines have been able to do so effectively. So it is a bit disappointing when we hear graduates saying, no, I want to go. I don't care how much exposure you're giving me, I want to leave. But I think we need to be really careful about what we're trying to do here. We're not here to change mindsets and change people. We're trying to set the right platform. And if they can use that to further their life and maybe come back, hopefully like I did at some point, so be it. So yeah.
Why do you think this business in Sri Lanka? You have explained so many other competitors and said.
Yeah, a couple of things. Sure. The first one is going to be very cliche because home is home, right? End of the day. I moved back about 6-7 years ago. And when I moved back, it was meant to be for 6 months. It's now 7th year now. So there is a strong pull about being home and, sort of giving back and doing it here. The second thing is more transactional. We do have a very good costing methodology here in terms of if you look at the regional costing, even before the rupee depreciation, Sri Lanka was still relatively one of the cheapest places to do processing work. But we also have a very high literacy rate and we have really good graduate pool here. It's a shame though, like I said, a lot of our graduates, even before this problem, the idea was always do your SIMA, do whatever you can, and you launch out to England, go to Dubai. That's always been the trend. But that was slowly changing about 5 years ago. And I was really positive about being able to leverage that. And I always kept thinking, if I can find the right sort of launch pad, if I can manage my risk appetite, this would be fantastic launching. Another thing is when I used to work in Australia and when we've had outsourcing conversations, one of the things that keeps coming back is communication. In Vietnam and Philippines, that's a huge hindrance. They find it very hard to communicate with the person on the other side of the phone. Same goes for India. I think the approach is quite aggressive without generalizing. I think generally the communication can be very aggressive. It can be quite destructive and not necessarily constructive. Whereas I've found that even with my co-workers there, the Sri Lankans are really sort of easy. We get along, very resilient. We know to like quietly just say put a head up, head down and get the work done. And we know how to balance, those sort of interpersonal situations. So I just thought that in terms of, leveraging and stuff, we were really well placed. So from an interpersonal point of view, in terms of costing, in terms of literacy, everything, it just makes sense for Sri Lanka to thrive in this. And also, I put this in my report, I didn't put it here. We were voted as one of the best top 25 places to run a BPO out of in 2019 before all of this happened. We were on a really good, solid ground to become something big, a bit of a force in the region. So it's unfortunate that that didn't really materialize, but hopefully, there's still time. So yeah, hopefully.
That's good. Before clarification, but you have mentioned technical skills, interpersonal and conceptual skills. But the students you have highlighted STEM.
Yeah.
Right, you have related to that content.
Yeah.
But I think much better to you promote yourself. You should market yourself.
Okay.
I think that's right. Should be about what is your technical skills.
Okay.
What is your interpersonal skills that you have in this business to achieve your business excellence? What's the conceptual skill that you have?
Okay.
But in this side, you have highlighted SMK.
Yeah, the funds itself. Yeah, okay.
But much better in this project, in this business, is your business.
Sure.
This is your baby. I think we should protect this business for achieve its excellence. Always try to market your talent.
Sure.
Right?
Okay, sure.
And last one, yes, that normally in the abstract, we normally use some technical words.
Okay.
Technical words. This is the purpose of the study. This is the method that we have to follow. This is the way collect data.
Sure.
My findings, that is the way that are some technical words. But here, if you have explained a lot of facts, I think hereafter is like this is the formal, colloquium,
Sure.
conference, then you know those things. And
Sure.
better to incorporate those words in presenting the abstract.
Okay,
Right?
sure.
But you know that it's not a thing for you, but I think much better. Right?
Sure.
I wish all my art is the
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Thanks.
My comments basically will be from a practical perspective.
Sure.
With my experience. Well, this is the part of your MBA program. And at the entrepreneurship skill. That is why you mentioned the skills that you gain in this project as conceptualization, interpersonal, technical. There's some important thing in this. So if these are entrepreneurship, 70% of startup businesses cannot survive beyond the first 2 years. There are empirical evidence. 70% startups
Sure.
cannot survive beyond first 2 years. Next hurdle coming in when the enterprise takes into 25. Okay. the empirical evidence, what are the reasons why they cannot? Number one, poor strategize. Failing to strategize. So your skill, more than the conceptualizing, interpersonal, if you fail to strategize,
Sure.
this business is not so. That's why I asked, how long have you been doing this? This business you started as in order to satisfy the MBA or what do you want?
No, it's something I wanted to do, but I've been very comfortable in a full-time job and I didn't want to take that risk. But like I said, during COVID, it just gave me the impetus to just get on with it. And the minute we were given options for MBA, I just thought, you know what, why
I
not?
think the best part that you can gain from behind that is going to be the core strength. You want to ensure your enterprise survive, grow and sustain. Strategies.
Sure.
Okay? There are two other things that you need to understand. If you want to ensure this enterprise will sustain, grow and further develop. Number one is strategy. It's about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial oriented. It's about doing what and how. A lot of
Okay.
people know what to do, but they don't know how.
How? Okay, sure.
Okay. So strategizing is the most number. The other one is poor planning. Again, part of the same.
Sure, strategizing, yeah.
And then three, not understanding the business model. Then what? I'll give you an example. When I was doing my MBA, I also selected entrepreneurship skill project. My guru was Dr. A.K. Then I went and started two businesses in Australia. Okay, we set up the largest automotive workshop in Western Australia.
Yeah.
Okay, it survived for almost 3 years. And in Melbourne, we had one of the largest lubricant blending and manufacturing. Brand name was Super. Super.
Yeah. Okay.
So doing very well. But the Australian economy is not resilient like Sri Lanka. And then the decision came. Government funded. So everyone they gave $2,000 check. 15 years, 10 years ago.
Yeah,
So
10 years.
those economies are like that. So you need to understand the external. That's one thing I wanted to know. Tell you.
Sure.
If you want to, I think this is the marvelous project. Only thing is, what is the differentiation? There are in virtual world, we are living in an era of outsourcing.
Yes.
But you need to place your concept, your enterprise. The differences. Why they would like to come to you? What is your differences?
Yeah, so far the differentiation has been the fact that in most cases we have a relationship and they feel that they can trust me with the work.
That can be complete.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
In this
Yeah.
competitive world,
Yeah.
anyone can be complete.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we truly encourage youngsters.
Yeah. No, but that's a really good point. Yeah.
Thinking beyond Sri Lanka. I think that we learn a lot from them. Theoretical, practical aspect of this is a breeding ground for entrepreneurs. So you need to understand.
Sure. Yeah.
Otherwise, those the difference between that now just to add something, but see, if you have done this in Australia, possibly 20 times higher than that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, very expensive, and they have minimum wages.
Yeah.
So Sri Lanka is the ideal place for back office people.
Yeah.
But you need to know that. Do you want to become an entrepreneur or businessman? Or do you know the people?
Yeah.
Because though most of those who cannot survive beyond 2 years startup,
Sure.
they were business people. They wanted to start a business.
Yeah.
But when you start an enterprise,
Yeah.
it will survive no matter what kind of volatility, turbulence comes to it.
Mm.
So a lot of people don't know that difference.
Sure.
Anyway, just to share my thoughts. with
No,
you.
thank you. Very valuable. Yeah.
This is the one concept that you can take to a very high level, provided you strategize.
Yeah.
You have to strategize for next 20 years.
Yeah.
Then you need to understand what are the changes.
Yeah.
It's about your ability to see the future. A lot of experience, but I don't have the time to, explaining.
Yeah.
And then no one can stop.
Sure.
No one can stop you. Competitors, whether you live in a different, country, you go.
Yeah.
So that's, at no point of having all these skills, you don't have that one.
The right strategy.
Strategize.
Yeah. Sure.
So
We are maximizing self-interest while achieving social well-being and growth.
Sure. Yeah.
But the business, they are only concerned.
For making money.
self-interest
Mm.
rather than concerning social well-being. Try one day, try to.
you have to have a big idea, start small,
Yeah.
but scale fast.
Yeah.
The difference between, example, entrepreneurs create paths.
After that, innovation,
Businesses just follow that.
Mm.
innovation, always, it's innovation. Everything.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So one of the things, yeah.
Academic expert,
Yeah.
Then anything else, but management will benefit. Again, it's about, if you know how to strategize your idea,
Yeah.
no one can.
Yeah.
Other things, you mention how other things, you can gain.
Sure.
That's the like the code.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we live in a world now. Some kind of chaos. We call it a border. Okay. You know, it is like Muka, we call it the old age. We call it border. Okay. You will tell us passport. Outplaced. Broken, disease, and dead breathing.
Very sad.
So, doing internationalization in your business. Now you want one little example. I always share my experience. About 10 years ago, I started taking little rubber scrap. And two days ago, during this volatile, it became the biggest export. No, we make the aircraft tires.
Oh, wow.
One tire is 5 2 tons. Especially, it's your differentiation, your niche market. And I supply to 48 countries and have branches in the USA. Just a tiny little idea like this. Tiny little idea. But strategy. So some ports, exclusively we supply. You know that NASA, the rockets, when they carry rockets, they have trailers, the axles operate separately. All the tires are supplied by us.
Oh,
We
wow.
manufacture and supply. Now
Wow.
I'm explaining to supply to the NASA, moon landing this sun. We have already
Wow.
spoken to them. So Sri Lanka, you mentioned Sri Lanka has a reputation for weak fuel, the skill people. So this is about leveraging your competitive advantage. What we did there, Sri Lanka is the best medical urban in the world. So that itself has a brand name.
Yeah.
So on the BPO, the Sri Lankans have a, inherent brand endorsement. Communication, you allow Indians to talk, that language.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Sri Lankans can adapt to any, even Japanese market, Korean market,
Yeah.
any market. I think, there are about 5 ships on now, right? Yeah. 5 ships, that's it.
Maybe in 20 years, I'll have 5 ships. I can be on a panel. Thank you very, very. Yeah, you're right. So one of the things we are sort of on the cusp of doing is I've been talking to some firms who want to set up their own back offices here. So we're trying to go in like a JV situation where I've said I'll train the staff because they can't fly people down from there to here. And I've said in return, I want a percentage of the business that comes out of it and also retain a certain level of it so that it continues to churn. But there is a lot of risk, like you said, because what we're doing, it's not magic. If you with the right training, anyone can do it. So I'm trying to slowly step out of that. This is what I do now full time. Yeah, my consulting work is really part time, but I do with MDF.
Where you have managed to be on 28 clients.
No, the sample was for 25. When I first started out, I was trying to get a sample survey. At the moment, I have about 85 clients. So each client on average has about 100 funds on average. Yeah. So
But the turnover,
at the moment, we are running at about, I think I said 70, but we're definitely doing more than that on the
you guys
books.
put the margin.
Very good margin because our costs are really low. Yeah.
Between the DP and the MP.
Yeah, we have a really solid margin. It comes down to process as well.
But it has the one page
Hmm.
standard, because what is the attract around.
Yeah, yeah. And also you get very comfortable when you have those big margins. So that's another thing this year I've been really trying to understand what we can. I'm trying to move a little away from the processing area. I want that to be maybe about 30% of the business, but I want to move into different things which can sort of churn more value addition. Something a lot of people are starting to do now in Sri Lanka, which is actually terrible for our country, is they're taking over the recruitment process. So they say we'll recruit someone here, train them for 3 months, and then on a work visa, they're sent overseas. I'm not trying to be holier than thou, but I just don't want to get into that because I'm a big believer of trying to retain the talent because I knew how hard it was a few months ago when we were trying to replace someone. So what I've been talking to clients there is saying, listen, if you all are willing to pay them in dollars, if you are willing to do like a pay structure, we can set up satellite offices for you here because real estate is still cheaper here than there, as you would know. So we're trying to sort of come up with some different ways where, staff also feel like they're working for, because a lot of these IT companies have that vibe. They know they're working for a foreign company, dollar, salaries pegged to the dollar and all the benefits are attractive. But not a lot of the accounting companies feel that way. I think they still feel very sort of downtrodden and bored and, so trying to do what I can to shift that a little bit. So we'll see. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
The question you want to ask him?
I just wanted to ask, your perspective might be very different, sir, because you're a male, but have you found that female entrepreneurs, and I don't know if there are many female entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka, but have you found that it's the same path or is it a little bit?
That matter. There is male or female. We have one of the countries. Those number of. You know how many enterprises, entrepreneurs in this country have percentage to the population? Less than 1.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's low.
Vietnam 27%,
Hmm.
India 10%.
Hmm.
Right? So our education system, our society has not. The entrepreneurs are like mosquitoes. To breed mosquitoes, what do you need?
The perfect conditions.
You need it's an environment.
Yeah.
They automatically come out. No?
Yeah, yeah.
Sri Lanka did not have, don't know, an environment, conducive environment to become
Yeah,
enterprising people.
yeah,
They were all from our childhood, either to become a doctor, you know,
Yeah.
engineer, this, that.
accountant.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I know, there are female entrepreneurs. They are all equal,
Yeah,
but they are all equal. They are more dynamic than sometimes us.
Mm. Interesting. But something what you said is right. I think regardless of gender, the environment in Sri Lanka to sort of help, if you don't know the right people or you don't have the right networks to come up.
That's a part of the entrepreneurial skill.
Yeah, the
When I
networking.
gave the
Yeah.
term, my mother gave me 200. I could not speak one single word in English.
Mm,
I didn't have anyone for political.
yeah,
It's about your ability to portray yourself. The
sure,
personal brand,
sure.
these are DNA of entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
When only you come to that level,
sure.
you don't need to, embed separately those things.
Sure.
Some may like you, some may not like you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
I think the next is. I have asked all the questions. The next person is. No, no, it is done. No.
Yeah, I also know. The second one also.
Any particular reason that the concept to start a business to become an entrepreneur? No, I'm not asking that. Yes, historically, part of my study.
Your father.
Do you have any
Yeah.
That is the intent in here. How is it?
Have you experienced?